First test run of me giving some updated pictures to Munro Live's presentation on the CyberTruck suspension. So what I did is I went in and I highlighted the components a little bit better on the images that I could find, the best images I can find online, and see if they help you out and see if you guys like what you see. So here we go. Start Munro Live. So I'll turn your volume down a smidge.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Munro Live. I'm here with Jordan, and today what we're looking at the Electrek photographs that they got from somebody who found a Tesla Cybertruck sitting at the side of the road. We never get that opportunity here at Munro. We look at the side of the road and we just haven't seen one of them laying around. So anyway, what we're looking at here is basically the front suspension. We can see that there's a casting back here and not much else. It looks pretty standard to me. You see anything?
Yeah, I mean, just a few observations. So it looks like a low pressure, either a low pressure, like a permanent mold type of die cast, or a sand casting, right? It's hard to see all the witness marks to get confirmation, but these cross hatches, right, help that casting cool and release from the mold. But the one thing that's indicative to me in looking at this and stating that it is a prototype is, if you look at this, these are the inner and outer tie rods, so the thing that connects to the steering rack underneath the vehicle. So the outboard one, or the OTR, outside tie rod end, this forged aluminum piece, goes into this, which this is the indicative piece of a prototype. This looks like a billet machined piece of steel, right? So why would you do that in a prototype? It's because you can do it off of bar stock. You don't need to have a tool set up to do it. You can put it on a lathe, do a secondary machine pass, and voila, you've got a tie rod.
Yeah, the little flat right here is the wrench flat.
Right.
So at the end of the day, again, this doesn't look extraordinary, this picture. I would suggest that we could see a lot of these different products that are in the marketplace right now that would look very, very similar to this. Go to the next one.
They're both correct here. This is nothing extraordinary. However, this does look very, very much like prototype work. It's billet machined stuff you do, low volume stuff you're going to get high robustness out of. So it also looks like something you may also have in an off-road aftermarket component just to beef up your suspension. But yeah, those guys are both correct. And I'm going to try to fast forward through their commercial, good products, I'm sure, and move to the next one where I've also highlighted the front suspension in orange.
Okay, so this is a better view of that same casting. We're looking at the front suspension here. And again, pretty much everything looks pretty conventional. But we did say, or actually Jordan and I were just talking a second ago, we're going to go to the rear in a second, and it's going to be made out of steel. And our speculation on this is that going to a casting is there for SORB, right?
Yeah, it could be a SORB enabler, right? So a lot of OEMs in the front, if you're not familiar with SORB, it's small overlap rigid barrier.
I'm going to move on from here because he's talked about SORB quite a bit, and it's good stuff. He definitely knows what he's talking about. But I'm going to just go on to the highlights of my picture.
Strategy to help fracture this whole corner node.
All right,
The rear of the product, and Jordan
pointed
pointed out something that surprised the daylights out of me because
Okay, so they did talk about the skid plate here, talking about the potential of it being some sort of carbon or SMC. Good observation. It's very hard to see in the pictures. It's very grainy, at least the ones I got. But I think they talked about this being steel, but I think looking at this is the Giga casting. It may be something that came off the Giga casting there. And if I go back in my little notes here, maybe I can, here we go. So this, you can see there's some points over here which may or may not be the right components, but once again, the Giga casting is highlighted this clip art, and you can see, of course, see the rears. But you see the ribbing, and the ribbing is very much something that's a feature in the Giga castings. It's front and rear. I've been up close and personal with them, so definitely know what I'm talking about with that. So moving on. They were going to the rear suspension, and we'll start back up.
I wasn't aware of that feature, and This is for rear wheel steering, so you want to jump into that, George?
Yeah, so this just caught my eye, right? And obviously we're now starting to get into CyberTruck territory in preparation for the vehicle arriving, but this is a ball joint. You only have a ball joint and a rear knuckle and a multi-link suspension like this if you've got to pivot that, right? So ball joints allow that knuckle to pivot, which is indicative that it is indeed four-wheel steer. So we've seen obviously the press images of this vehicle having the four-wheel steer, tight turning radius, but this is one of the enablers, right? So on the, it looks like the opposing side, they've got a steering rack unit that's probably tying into the top end of that knuckle and steering from the rear. So,
and
yeah.
this is basically just two stampings welded together.
Yeah.
It's light, cheap, and for this application, probably a perfect choice.
Yeah, the interesting thing going aluminum in the front, steel in the rear, we used to see folks do this back when there was differentials galore in different cars, right? All these rear-wheel drive applications where in the front they'd have an aluminum differential and in the rear they'd have a cast iron differential because they wanted better weight distribution. So we've seen that in a similar...
Those are good points, but I think they're more valid for ICE vehicles when you have more trouble distributing the weight. EVs don't have that problem. The battery is in the center and between the axles and very low, so your center of gravity, your weight distribution is pretty darn good to start with an EV. You don't have as much weight overhanging in the front and rear axles because the motors are also inboard and lower and smaller. So I think my thoughts are you're dealing with steel in the rear because it's stronger, because it's for towing and hauling. It's a truck. It's got to be strong. Front suspension doesn't see those loads nearly as much. You're not going to be putting a lot of weight in the front. You're going to be putting most of the weight in the rear or towing. So that's my opinion. But Jordan's not wrong. Those are valid points, but I think it's a little bit more for ICE vehicles.
Similar sense applied to rear suspension systems or cradles, where if you don't have a good 50-50 weight distribution front to rear, you start to go to steel. But as Sandy pointed out, from a cost and a mass perspective, it's actually very surprising when you actually look at the data when comparing like suspension systems to like suspension systems. The stamped steel clamshell welded strategy, which is what they have here, is among the lightest and definitely least costly.
Yeah, it's usually a wash between aluminum and stamped steel. It's, like I say, it's a perfect application for Sorb for aluminum in the front, and this is a perfect application here. Yep. So last thing, while we're on this slide, is the debate over whether that other shield is carbon fiber or not. It's a grainy picture, so it's hard to really tell.
Yeah, it's hard to see. It could be like a textile PET, which is great for MVH, but at the rear of the vehicle, that wouldn't make much sense, right? You're not going to get a whole lot of noise transmission going through the bed into the cab. But similar to the front, it does look like there's an ever so slight witness of a crosshatch, which would be that like SMC carbon perhaps. Yeah, but yeah, I'm interested to see what they did there.
It's a nice catch.
Overall, the carbon, it's good for like puncture resistance, definitely good for light weighting and stiffness. But
straight, yeah.
Right.
Any off-roading kind of an experience is going to be, that's going to give you a whole lot more protection if that is carbon fiber.
Sure.
Let's try the next one. So again, we're looking at, this is your air suspension system. It's kind of like a little bit more like upside.
So yeah, they rotated it, or I rotated it, and you can clearly see New Zealand tests. So New Zealand tests, I don't know why it says tests or testing, but these are obviously the units that were, or this truck was one of the units that was in New Zealand for testing. So clearly a prototype here. Big red arrow. And so this is the image they're actually looking at. So I picked up, and of course it's a sway bar link. They don't talk about that. I just highlighted it just for the fun of it. And again, the New Zealand test, which they miss, maybe it's because I was looking at it very zoomed in and I could see it, and it's much easier to read when you zoom in. However, can't make out the rest of the detail on here. Looks like the right side, but yeah, they got their own labels on there. But that's just part of the air suspension. Let them keep talking here for a second.
Down, sideways, whatever.
Right.
But at the end of the day, this is very, very similar to pretty much every one of the more modern of the trucks that are coming out. Everybody's going to air suspension. I mean, we worked on the Ram. That was the first one, I think. Yep. And on and on and on. Pretty much everybody's got it. Our Rivian, the Rivian has it. And it gives you a lot of nice qualities. You can kneel, so you can bring the car down for getting in and out, bring it back up for different ride heights for off-roading, or when you're going fast on the expressway, you want to have as tight as you can to the ground.
Load leveling for trailer.
Load leveling, yeah, for trailers, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's great. And then the other, sort of marquee off-roading element here is the shield around the bag, right? You get a puncture in that bag, you're going to go from a really nice ride to a really bad ride very quickly.
Or no ride at all.
Or no ride, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's try the next one.
My guess is that shield is steel, not aluminum, because it's going to offer a lot more resistance to denting, and you don't want to dent or rub against the airbag that's up in there. But yeah.
It's like a little bit more of the same. I don't see anything here that jumps.
Again, they overlook the Giga casting, which is here. Well, maybe they don't. I think they come back around to it. So here, looks like you see more ribbing here, and then I think more ribbing up here. So I believe that goes up and around the top of the shock tower, and the upper mount of the strut will bolt into that. So there you go. Try not to mix up my words and mumble it out too much. But
straight out at me.
Yeah, just more parts to the strut, right? So this on the side here, part of the adaptive nature of the air, right? So often these will be either vents, right? One-way valves, things like that to allow air in and out. But one thing did catch my eye, and if you go back to the other image, yeah, right here we see a glimpse of some of those giant, beautiful castings that we always point out, right? So
that's probably part of the Giga casting. Well, that
definitely
it's
is
hard to say, but it's part of the Giga casting. Whether it's front or rear or not, I don't know. But
and then I think the last thing that caught my eye is these orange cables, right? So these are probably the high voltage cables running likely from inverter to battery, or maybe the charge cables. It's hard to get a grasp on the packaging here. But the thing that I find interesting is we've got an airbag here. There's an aluminum shield around it. We've got high voltage cables running underbody. Most OEMs out there would cover this completely. They would shield it, especially in an off-road application.
I'm looking at this.
And it probably will.
I don't know whether somebody took a shield off or something, but that's obviously a track for the high voltage. I'm wondering.
There might be a stud on the body, right? Often these get pushed over, so the stud.
But there's no nut or anything.
Yeah.
We would have seen something. Anyhow, at the end of the day, there might be more going on here, or we think that this is definitely a prototype. And sometimes prototypes don't get all of the parts. So anyway, let's try the next one. Oh, we already hear next one. Okay, so this, I'll go ahead. You can.
Yeah, so what it looks like, and obviously this is grainy, doesn't even do it justice, but this photo looks like it's in the rear suspension, and this is either like a camber link or a toe link, or what more specifically. Yeah. It's probably the rear tie rod. So when we talk about the rear steering system, this is likely the rear tie rod. You see you've got these what are called jam nuts on either side. And then in the center here, as you rotate this one direction, it'll bring these two closer. Rotate it the other direction, it'll separate them out. So as you're aligning or you want different properties from your suspension geometries, this is going to help with that. And then the jam nuts, once you get it where you want it, cinch those down like the front, and they're not going anywhere.
Nice mechanical adjustment of your toe. And yeah, here's
so the one thing that's unique about this type of a product, it's got right and left hand threads. So on one side you'll have a normal thread, the other side is going to have a left hand thread, and the left hand thread will allow you when you're cranking that center. So that's what makes it go in and out. So next one. And
that's a
here
better
we are.
picture
That's
of it.
a better picture of the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, going into that ball joint like we talked about, aluminum knuckles.
Right. Next.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yep.
Well, there you go. Okay, so that's our little assessment on what's going on with the pictures here of the Cyber.
So there, I helped. Hope these pictures helped out. Were a little bit more clear and gives people a little bit better insight of what's going on. But this is definitely a prototype truck. So if it's broke down on the side of the road, it's probably been worked pretty hard, and they probably are finding things wrong with it, shaking it down, getting things ready for final production, which is probably happening right now. So yeah, they'll continue to test these things until they're completely useless. But yeah, you want to squeeze as many miles out of these things as you can, just to try to make sure everything's shaken down very well. All right, that's about all I've got. So thank you very much. Hope this is helpful. And if anybody wants me to help them out with this kind of stuff, just let me know.